Welcome to tonight's live stream. I'm going to get started in a minute. I'm just got to let everybody else on social media know that the live stream is going on now. Okay, I'm going to get started. Glad to see you here, Blonde Hobbit. Glad to see you here, Far Side of the Fan. I'm going to get started right now. And great to see you, Nightingale Wednesday Nightmare. Really glad to see you here. Going to get started on tonight's topic, which asks the critical question: do we need Black leadership to get to Black empowerment? Now, tonight's live stream's topic was inspired by a conversation I was having with one of my family members a couple of days ago, where we were discussing the George Floyd protests. And as we were discussing the George Floyd protest, she proposed that we really need Black leadership in order to get some sort of tangible goals. However, I disagree with my family member, because when I take a critical examination of some of the things that we have achieved so far with these George Floyd protests, we, as I see it, don't really need Black leadership to achieve Black empowerment. And the reason why I've come to that conclusion is due to what I have seen so far with your Comicsgate and with what I've seen so far with the George Floyd protests, and what I listened to a Professor Black Truth video yesterday, which really reinforced a lot of the points that I'm going to discuss in tonight's live stream. Now, back in the day, we had Black leadership, and like your Malcolm X and your Martin Luther King, and they were the de facto representatives of the Black community, not to mention the Black bourgeoisie of the Boule, who were appointed by white supremacy. And with that leadership, the Black community managed to make some progress with the civil rights movement. However, when I take a critical examination of that so-called leadership, at the end of the day, a lot of that leadership really failed the Black community. And the reason why that leadership failed the Black community is because a lot of that leadership wound up getting compromised. And many of those so-called leaders who were supposed to represent us, they started representing themselves and using us as a proxy in order to enrich themselves at our expense. You want to know how to Cash App me, Kareem 2018? I will leave the Cash App in the chat, and the Cash App is right here. That's the Cash App. And I'm going to get back to my topic. If you guys want to donate to the Cash App, you can donate to the Cash App. But with a lot of our leaders, they wound up getting compromised because a lot of them, they really just could not stay focused on the goals. And because they had human failings, they started thinking about themselves. Now, some of them started thinking about themselves from day one. Others wound up getting really discouraged and started thinking about themselves and preserving themselves because they were challenged by white supremacy. And a lot of these guys, they wound up saying to themselves, it's just better for me to just take what I can and get mine than go out here and try to achieve something tangible for the Black community. So we've had leadership, again, like your Jesse Jacksons, your Martin Luther Kings, and many others, like your John Lewis and many others. But we have a big problem with our leadership because a lot of our leaders, again, they either wind up getting compromised like many of the baby boomers, or if they try to stand for their ideals like Malcolm X, they wind up getting assassinated. So that's why I don't believe we need leadership this time around, because we've had our fair share of so-called Black leaders, but all they have done is drive us into a burning house. So what I believe that Black people need is a brand new strategy, and we have to follow some of the concepts from the places like your Comicscape and what New Black Media have been talking about. And with this leaderless concept, there is no individual to be compromised, and there are no individuals who can be bought and sold. Moreover, there are no individuals that they can handpick, like your Black boule and your Black bourgeoisie, and then shoehorn into the role of leadership to pretend that they are representing Black people. And that's something that we have to understand, that that's what they try to do with these leaders out here. What they want to do is use these leaders to so-called represent us, but in actuality, they are playing both sides of the argument, because what they want to do is have this so-called leader that they appointed from the boule become the mouthpiece, which just parrots back what these racists want us to hear and what these leaders want to be told to us. So that's what they want from your so-called leaders. And that's why I really am not a big fan of bringing a so-called Black leader as the so-called representative of the Black community. Now, the other reason why I'm not a fan of a so-called leader being appointed over the Black community is because your Black community these days is far more diverse these days, far more expansive these days, and we have far more many different types of groups and cultures that we just can't have one group representing us. So as I see it, the whole idea of a Black leader like an Al Sharpton or a Louis Farrakhan or many others, that whole concept just doesn't work in the 21st century, because we have so many different factions in the Black community. I mean, we have your Hoteps, we have your pro-Blacks, we have your average everyday brothers and sisters, we have your hood, you have your thugs. We have too many different groups to say we want representation from one group. And one of the other big problems with that so-called representation that I talked about in Spellbound, my novel, was that all of these groups are in this civil war. And because they're in this civil war and they're fragmented, most of these groups that are just out here jockeying for these pseudo titles to get white validation and white approval. And that really doesn't help us, because when you have different groups jockeying for these titles of leadership to say that they're going to be the pseudo representative of the Black community, then we really can't focus on what really needs to be focused on. And that's why I'm really not with the whole idea of one representative leader or a group of leaders, because again, the boule, they want to come in and try to push themselves in and not be listening to the people. They want to speak for us. And then we have these other factions that want to speak for us. So that's why I believe we need what we have right now, which is a leaderless Black community. And we need to start focusing on something more as related to tangibles. And to get to tangibles, we really need a focus on setting an agenda, because I really believe that, let me see what I've got here, but I believe we need an agenda first. And that agenda, it should be our priority. And that agenda, yeah, it really should be our priority. Okay, I haven't gotten the Cash App yet, so it's a little screwed up today. I was doing the Cash App with one of the artists I was working with, so it just takes some time, Kareem, but we'll see what happens. If not, you can hit me up on PayPal and I'll be all right. But the whole thing is, I really want to see us focusing on a Black agenda, because the Black agenda needs to be our main priority. Because when you have an agenda is a set of goals that we're going to set for ourselves. And when you have a set of goals that you set for yourself, then you have something you can measure it by. Because leaders, what we had in the past, they were all focused on just civil rights and equality, and that morphed into white acceptance. But when you have an agenda, you have a set of tangible goals that you have to achieve, and you have a set of tangible standards that that are established as you work towards those goals. So when you have an agenda, you have a series of goals you've set for yourself, and that set of goals is what we're measuring things by. And that's why I believe agenda is more important than leadership, because an agenda is the thing that gives people purpose. An agenda gives people again, set of goals, and an agenda allows you to set a direction for where you want to go. And an agenda is something that once you have laid it out in stone, you now again have something that you have to follow. So you have this series of tangibles that you are working towards, and you have a series of standards that have to be followed as you're working to achieve those goals. That's why it's far more important for us to have a Black agenda, because when you have a Black agenda, everybody is on the same page. And if everybody is on the same page, then we can focus on what we need to do, what we need to take care of, and what we need to accomplish, and measure that by a standard that allows us to see how we are progressing towards achieving those goals. So that's why agenda is far more important than leadership, because when you have agenda, you have again, set of things you are working towards. Because as a publisher, I work on an agenda. And again, that agenda is cohesive with my mission of creating positive stories as related to the African American experience and diversifying the Black book market. So I have my mission, and as I'm working on my mission, I set goals for what I want to accomplish. And as I'm working towards those goals, I can check off the boxes as I'm going along and say, okay, as I'm working on the catalog, like for 2020, I can say, okay, I've got this cover for ISIS, the main event, and from Bill Walko. So I've got that. I can now start doing the Photoshop and the page layouts for the book. And then after I do that, I can sit down and say the release date for this book is going to be something like April 6th. So I have hard dates for what I'm going to do, and I have hard dates for what I want to accomplish. And that's what an agenda allows you to do. It allows you to, once you've gotten the goals you want to accomplish, you can then start setting hard time for what you want to do and what you want to accomplish. And you can measure that as you're going along and see what goals you need to do and what things you need to do as you're meeting these goals. Because as you're meeting the goals, you then have to go back and check things over. And again, that's all of what an agenda gives you a thing. It gives you a blueprint for what you want to do, what direction you want to go in, and it allows you to measure what you want to accomplish. Same thing for John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose. As I was doing this book, I was constantly talking to Mike Williams, the artist, as I was talking to him about the cover. But as I was doing that, I was working on the editing and doing the page layouts so I could get this, and editing the book for punctuation, spelling, and grammar, so I can get it to the market on March 10th. So when you're having an agenda, you have goals that you're setting, and you're working towards meeting those goals. And you're measuring yourself as you're meeting those goals. You're watching what you're doing. You're watching what people are doing. Thank you, Kareem, for the Cash App. I got it just now. Thank you very much. And thank you, Yak Diesel, for the super chat. Yeah, he says he was a Black nerd on board when someone were trying to turn this into an LGBTQ issue. And we can't afford to lose focus. And that's one of the things an agenda allows you to do. An agenda allows you to stay focused on what you want to do and what you want to accomplish. And it prevents people from coming in and sidetracking you. Thank you, Leo Dandles, for the super chat. Really appreciate it. If you guys want to donate to the super chat, you can do so, or you can donate to the Cash App. It all helps me allow to make more live streams and pay for the internet. And it also allows me to put great covers on books like the ISIS, the main event, and John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose, which are part of the 2020 catalog. And I have some more great surprises coming for 2020. Thank you, Leo Daniels. Glad to see you here. I'm working on different goals. But again, when you're in business, you have goals you want to accomplish. You have goals you want to work towards. And we as Black people, we need to start seeing ourselves as dealing with these people out here who are white and non-Black as business. And we cannot sit there and get emotional with them, because when you have an agenda, again, an agenda is all about business. An agenda is all about working towards your goals of taking care of business. And an agenda, again, keeps you focused and on point. And that's why agendas are more important than leadership, because an agenda is something that gets everybody on the same page, and it gets everybody focused on what the mission is and focused on the goal. So we need a Black agenda, and we need a Black agenda right now. So when I look at, again, the whole George Floyd situation, it shows me that we don't need Black leadership. We need a Black agenda, because the Black agenda is going to be the blueprint that allows everybody to be on the same page, and more importantly, be on code. Because another part of an agenda is creating a code for everybody to follow. And when everybody is on code, oh, great to see you here, Yukasama 2001, Steve Wallamack, and Trex Manifest. When you have everybody on code, everybody is following the code. Now, we can still have our diversity as related to different subgroups like pro-blacks, hoteps, African-American goths, African-American comic fans, brothers and sisters. But the whole thing is, when you have the agenda, you have the mission, you have the code, you have the unwritten rules that everybody's going to follow, and the written goals that we're going to work towards. And when you have all of these things, again, you have that measure. And that measure is very important, because when you set goals, like when I go out here and set a goal to publish a book, like an ISIS, the main event, I set a goal for what I want to do months in advance. And again, I work towards that. And as I'm working towards each step, I am working to measure those goals that I'm trying to accomplish as I work towards the publication date. So when you have that agenda, you have those things that you need to do, those things that are done, and those things I need to check over, and those people I need to communicate with. And all of that comes together towards making sure each thing that you're working towards is going to get accomplished. Now, we did not have an agenda back during the civil rights movement, and that was one of the things that really undermined us, because you had all of these so-called Black leaders coming up, and all of them came up without setting any sort of goals. Now, some of these guys, they weren't setting goals because they really did not want to have anything to measure them by. And others wanted that because they wanted that covert contract where if something wound up with a setback, they could wind up getting a pass for failing. But when you have an agenda and you have goals, you again have that measure, and everybody is measuring you by what you have accomplished during that time. So when you have people working with you, each person is held accountable. And that's one of the other good things about having an agenda, is people are held accountable. So we don't get guys like Al Sharpton who are sitting there for 30 years and of marching and protesting, and they have not produced any tangible results as related to justice. So guys like that, they are gonna, when you have an agenda, they're gonna be pushed out of the whole system because they're not being effective as related to the agenda of producing tangibles, because that is the ultimate measure that people will be, judged by, is the tangibles they produce. Because when people look at these guys, they're going to say, look, okay, we sent you out here to achieve goals as related to tangibles, as related to justice, tangibles as related to legislation, and tangibles as related to bringing economic resources back to the Black community, and legislation that protects the Black community. So these are the goals that we have set in the agenda. And if you have not brought the tangibles to the table, then you are going to be removed from whatever task we assign you to. So that's what happens in a business when you hire employees. You give them tasks to accomplish. And if these individuals just can't achieve the task that you told them to accomplish, these individuals are taken out of their positions, they are terminated, and they are sent packing because they didn't bring in the tangibles. So when you have a business like I do, when I'm looking, like I said, I'm trying to get sales for books like this, ISIS, the main event, and John Hayes, the man with nothing to lose, I'm looking to get numbers. And again, numbers are a measure as related to how we are progressing, what standards we are achieving, and what we are and how we are doing as related to the goals we have set in the agenda. And you can get your own copy of ICE the May movement on Amazon in paperback or Kindle. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free. And if you want to read John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose, you can also get that book in paperback and Kindle format as well. You get both of those books as well. But I'm going to get back to the topic. But again, when you have an agenda, you have everybody focused on mission and not on them representing you, because it's not about who represents you. It's about who is focused on the agenda. And when you have people focused on the agenda, they are looking to produce results. So that's something Black people really need to start getting focused on, because if you don't have your mission and your agenda, then you are just wasting your time marching and protesting, because instead of you detailing what goals you want to accomplish, you have all of these other people coming in looking to hijack your platform and push their agenda instead of you getting what you need, because you're not focused on the goals you have set for your agenda. So that's why a lot of Black people over the last 50, 60 years have gotten their movement hijacked by these white women, these feminists, these alphabets, these Hispanics, and all of these other people. And they have leapfrogged in front of the line of us because we want to include people, but we don't understand that when you include others and let them piggyback on your agenda, they wind up making their agenda a priority. And we have let too many people get in front of the line, and that's why you have to make agenda a priority, because when you have a focus on your agenda, then what happens is you have that measure as related to your goals, and you have that measure as related to what tangibles are being brought to the table as related to you. So the big problem, again, with our Black leadership is they're not really leading anyone. And when they are out here, we just let anybody come up and say they're a leader, even though they don't meet any sort of standard for leadership. Like when I look at your Al Sharpton, it's like, what qualifies this man to be any sort of leader? And when I look at many of these other people who are coming out here trying to represent the Black community, I ask, what standard did we establish for them to be a leader? So, I mean, a lot of these people have college degrees. A lot of these people went to big universities, but that does not, as I see it, meet the standard of a leader. A leader is somebody who can go out here and set goals, set an agenda, and then delegate tasks to each individual working towards meeting the goals that need to be accomplished. That's what leadership is, but we don't have anybody like that. We have a lot of guys who know how to make these great speeches filled with 50-cent words and can rile up people's emotions, but we don't have anybody there who has a business plan to set up that series of goals we need to accomplish. That's the thing we really need to focus on, is creating that agenda and creating that agenda towards working towards constructive tangibles. That's the thing I see as, again, the biggest priority, because yes, we've gotten a lot of people marching and protesting for George Floyd, and they have achieved some goals like getting those other 3 officers indicted, but that's just the start of the work. And that's why the agenda is important, because when you have the agenda, you can then start pushing towards keeping the goals you work towards. And as I see it with your George Floyd, one of the most important things is keeping the pressure on these prosecutors and letting them know that they are going to be held accountable, because that's the most important thing about when you have an agenda is you're going to keep pushing towards your goals, and you're going to keep the pressure on because you know that telling people a feel-good speech is just not good enough. You want to see that goal accomplished and meet that tangible goal that you have set for yourself, because when you have met the tangible goal, guess what? You will have accomplished something, and that accomplishment will be something that you can check off and say, we met that goal. So that's why you need the agenda, because that agenda, again, it cements everything that you want to do, and it allows you to keep that momentum going, because again, you've already measured it by saying, okay, we've made the protest for George Floyd, we've gotten these other officers indicted. Now what we have to do is keep that pressure on in order to achieve that tangible of justice. Moreover, as we are working on getting that tangible of justice for George Floyd by getting these officers imprisoned, we also have to work towards the tangible of creating policy that ensures that no other Black man or woman is brutalized by the police. And those are terms that we need to make ourselves, because I see a mistake that they're making, a lot of the Black people, as they're marching and protesting and letting the government go in here and try to dictate the terms of how they're going to change the policy, when it's supposed to be changed to our terms, because it's about what we say is considered a standard for how Black people are going to be treated by law enforcement. And we need to be the ones setting that standard, and setting that standard by our terms. And that's something that, again, when you have an agenda, you're going to sit there and say, I'm not trying to do this on your terms where you will try to give this guy a pass under the table. No, we're going to do this by my terms, and my terms are the ones we're going to follow, and my terms are the ones that we're going to work towards, and our standards are going to be established by what we say, not by what you say. So that's what happens when you have somebody who is focused on code and on an agenda. They are looking to get their goals accomplished, and they're not sitting there waiting for you to tell them what you're going to offer them. They're telling you what you want and what you're going to do, because you represent us in the government. And as our representatives, you have to follow what we, the people, say. So that's something that people really need to start thinking about as related to a Black agenda. Again, Black agenda is not on the government's terms. The Black agenda is on Black people's terms. So when you're a Black person, you have to sit down and really, again, think about the goals you want to accomplish. What's going on, Luciano? I'm glad to see you here. And what you want to get out of things, because in the past, our previous Black leadership, all they wanted to do was go out here and make some compromises, make some feel-good announcements, and pacify the Black masses. And then the whole issue flares up again. But if you want to solve the problem, you have to, again, have an agenda, because agendas shut down any sort of people making compromises, because all of your people are mostly on code. And when most of your people are on code, they are focused on agendas and getting those agendas done, because they know they're going to be held accountable. And that accountability means that they or have to work towards credibility. And if your credibility is not measured by you going out here and doing superficial things like marching and protesting, no, your credibility is measured by tangible results. So you have to have something that people can hold in their hand, like the way I have these books in my hand. You have to have something tangible to show for your work. And that's something Black people have to think about as related to why we need to work with a more leaderless approach, because a leaderless approach means we get tangibles we hold in our hands, whether it be tangible legislation or tangible economic resources in the form of earmarks and government programs, or tangible reparations paid out to Black people for past slavery and current ongoing discrimination. When you have tangibles, you have something to measure it by. You could someone speaking on agendas. One goal: police reform. Should law enforcement forgiveness be removed completely? I don't think law enforcement should be removed, but a law enforcement needs to be held to a standard, because their job is to protect and serve we the people, and we the people need to hold them to a standard for their behavior, a standard for their conduct, and a standard for how they treat suspects and perpetrators and interact in communities. So we really need a set of we the people to hold them accountable and hold them to a standard. One of the things we're not getting is people holding them to a standard, because our so-called leadership, all they're looking to do is make excuses and give people passes, because they believe that this can't happen to them. And they believe that because they are in with these white supremacists, they are going to be safe. But the whole thing is, no one is safe as related to a system when there are no standards, because when there are no standards, people just do whatever they want, because there's no measure of accountability. And when there is no measure of accountability, that allows people to get away with stuff. And a lot of our Black leaders, they like it that way, because they can then establish this covert contract with these white racists and get themselves taken care of under the table. And then as they're getting taken care of under the table, then they don't really get anything done in the community. They get money put in their pockets, but the community suffers because we don't have anybody meeting tangible goals for working towards things like building Black-owned businesses or working on an economics set of goals for enriching and empowering Black people. Because when you have an agenda as related to the Black community, you also have an agenda as related to the Black economy. And when you have an agenda, again, you have a set of goals for what you want to do. Like, for example, if I wanted to go out here and employ Black youth, I start setting up a series of goals for ways to employ young brothers and sisters. And I start setting up a series of goals for how I'm going to get those Black boys and girls employed for things like summer jobs. And I have a measure for who is working, where they're working, and what they're doing. And when I have all of these measures in place, all those things allow us to see tangibles as related to Black employment and tangibles as related to the flow of Black dollars back to the Black community. So that's what agenda does. Agenda, again, gives you that set of goals so that you can go out here and have those measures. And again, you see the tangible results when you're seeing Black men and women going to work, when you see Black girls and boys working at after-school jobs, when you see your Black communities getting resources in the terms of, oh, you're getting Black-owned businesses and you're getting tax revenue brought back to your community, and you're getting things like your traffic lights, you're getting your streets paved, and you're getting the money that you pour in through your tax dollars back to you. And again, these are tangibles that you can see in front of you, hold in your hand, and walk on. And these dollars that you are spending out here, you see them coming back to you, because the agenda sets the standards for what you're supposed to receive, and the agenda sets the standards for what people are supposed to bring to you. So that's why agenda is important, because again, leaders come and go, but an agenda gives us that blueprint that everybody has to follow. And when you have the blueprint in place, then everybody, again, is on that same page. And if one person leaves or one person quits or one person, another one can come in and replace that person. So it's not about the person like a Martin Luther King or a Malcolm X or a Louis Farrakhan or anybody out here. It's not about an individual. It is about the group. And when you have an agenda, the group members can then come together and the group members can then come in and fill in a spot. It's just like when you work at a company out here, when you're working at a company and an employee leaves, another person who is qualified to do the work comes in and replaces that individual. Now, there may be an adjustment period for that individual, but after 6 months to a year, that individual is going to start producing tangible results. And if that person, again, does not produce tangible results, they can then be held accountable and replaced by the people in the community, because the people in the community, again, are not going out here looking at this person's pedigree, like a Barack Obama who has his Harvard degree, or your Roland Martin, who's another one of these Ivy League boule Negroes out here. That's not the measure we are measuring this individual by. No, we are measuring this individual by the tangibles they produce, and we're measuring them by the results as related to the goals they were supposed to work towards. So when you have that, again, agenda, this guy has to follow the agenda. And again, we have to start working and establishing agenda, because agenda keeps us all together. An agenda is something Black people need, because we've had, again, leaders have come and gone, but leaders are not something that's important. Agenda is more important than leadership. And I know I keep repeating it, but I want you to understand the importance of agenda. Agenda, again, gives you that blueprint where you can see all of your goals outlined, where you can see all of your goals in front of you, and you can then start going out here and delegating each task to different people in the community. And if these people cannot meet the goals, then you find others who go out here and meet the goals. And that's one of the things that gets you towards, again, political power, because when you are working with politicians, you need to be able to insist on tangibles, because that's what they're supposed to be voting for, bringing you tangibles back to your community. Otherwise, it's just wasting your time. And this individual is just making money for themselves at your expense. So when you go out here and you want to hire a politician, you are telling them what you want done. And if they can't get what you want done, then it's time to replace them. Same thing with your Black business owners and people in your community. If they can't meet your standards, then it's time for them to go. So that's another part of agenda, is you establish standards for everybody's behavior and conduct, and a code for everybody to follow as related to how we're going to carry and conduct ourselves. And we also, when you have agenda, you have people going out here looking out for all of us, again, because everybody's looking at that page and we're saying, okay, this is what we need to do. And if this guy is off code, then we have to go talk to him and get him on code, or we need to start putting distance between ourselves and this individual. Well, when it comes down to Al Sharpton's speech, Luciano, I'm really not concerned with Al Sharpton's speech, because I've heard dozens of speeches from these so-called Black leaders, and a speech just makes you feel good, but a speech does not really help solve the problem. That's the big problem with Black leadership out here, is they don't solve problems. They just tell people what they want to hear. They tell them what makes them feel good, but when you're out here and you're supposed to be working towards building, you want to have somebody working on tangibles because your measure is those tangibles. Just like what I'm showing you here, these books are tangibles. I can hold them in my hand. They're available on Amazon.com right now for you to buy. And that's what we're working towards, something that you can say, okay, I've accomplished something I can hold in my hand or I can see in my community, or a set of standards that we see people following. We are working towards tangibles, not towards something like, oh, we got a speech and that makes us feel good. Because you come out of the speech feeling good, but you go back to the same rundown, busted community with no resources. And that's the big con that many Black people keep falling for, is they keep listening to the pimp pastors and the huckster politicians, but none of these people are held accountable, and they just are not held to any sort of standard. So we need to start saying what our standard is and not have our standard dictated to us like things like a Lift Every Voice program. No, what we need to do is say, this is our agenda, and this is what we are looking for from, our business owners and our politicians. And this is what we're looking for if you want to do business in this community. If you want to come here and do business in our community, you're not going to be like the Arab-owned stores or the Korean hair and nail salons right now. No, we're going to have a standard for customer service. We're going to have a standard for what type of products you want to sell in our community, because we're not going to have you selling us stale and rotten food. We're not going to have you selling us garbage, and we're not going to have you selling trash. We're going to have a standard like these white and non-Black communities have for their communities. You don't see malt liquor over 100 variations in their community. You don't see stale food in their community. You see a standard that they set. And again, that's because they have an agenda, because their agenda is set by those standards they have. And they say, look, we want certain things in our community, and we want these things because this is about us establishing our quality of life and establishing what we want so that everybody can have the same experience. So we want standards in place. And that's something Black people have to start getting used to. But when you have an agenda, you get used to having standards. You get used to saying, I'm not going to settle for less, and I'm not going to take substandard as my standard. I'm not going to accept mediocrity, and I'm not going to accept subpar from anybody, because when you have an agenda, you're saying, okay, this is the standards we have for our community. This is the bar we are setting for entry into our community, and this is what we measure our community by. And if you cannot meet the bars we have set in terms of standards, then you are not going to be allowed in our community. That's what many of these other communities say, but the Black community, we often give everybody a pass, and then they want to come into our communities, and then they enrich themselves at our expense. So we need to set a standard for ourselves. And again, that's the start of building your agenda, is saying, this is what we accept. This is what we require. This is what we are going to insist upon as our minimum for our community. And again, our standards in the Black community, they have been lowered because we don't have many Black men leading the head of household. And oftentimes when you have a lot of female-headed households, the standard goes lower because a lot of women will just accept anything, and they will accept anything because they don't have any man to sit there and say, look, there's a line that needs to be put in the sand as related to boundaries, and there's a line that needs to be set as related to the quality of life. And again, that all goes into an agenda where all of you come together and say, okay, this is our standard of living. This is our standard for life. This is our standard. And this is how we are going to disseminate the tangible resources in the community so that we can maintain that standard for a quality of life. And too many Black people, they get emotional about things like the murder of George Floyd. And you have a right to be emotional about the murder of George Floyd, but the thing we need to do is get focused on goals, because when you focus on goals, then again, you can hold people accountable, like that DA out here who looks like he doesn't really want to charge and prosecute these officers. He needs to be held accountable. And again, this is part of you keeping the pressure on, keeping the momentum going. And that's all part, again, of an agenda. Is you have people who, again, once they see what the goals are, they're motivated to keep focused on what they need to do, and they are motivated to keep the pressure on. And that's the thing that's really important about agenda, is you have people who, again, once they see what they have to do, they are going to keep working on it until they get what they need done. And they're going to keep pushing towards that goal because they understand that they need to meet this tangible goal in order to maintain their position. But when I look at today's Black leadership, we have no standards for them. We have no accountability for them. And because they can call a news conference and they have a big mouth, they will sit there and talk all of this nonsense, but that's not something tangible that we have achieved. I mean, when I look at Al Sharpton's track record of 0-15 for getting justice, that's a clear measure to me that this man should not be in any sort of leadership position. Because when you have a man who is not gotten justice for people for over 30 years, it's time to give him his walking papers. And it's time to let others come in who can bring in tangible results, because we don't have time for jokers. We don't have time for clowns. And we don't have time for people who will compromise. And just give me a second here. All right, but you want to have somebody who can be measured. And again, you want to, it's going on systematic, glad to see you here, but you want somebody who can be measured to a standard. I had some issues on the other side of the room I had to take care of, but now it's taken care of. But you really want that out here. And again, Al Sharpton, he's just been given passes for years. And again, these guys need to be fired, and they need to be fired ASAP. And that's one of the things I believe is, when you have an agenda, you can fire incompetent people, you can fire screw-ups, and you can get rid of these people because they clearly are not meeting the goals that need to be met. They clearly aren't meeting the agenda that needs to be accomplished. And what's going on, Chris? Glad to see you here. Chris is running the getting ready to run the Omega Black Indiegogo, which is some action-packed Black manga. And I'm the editor on that manga. Let me see and he's trying to get to 300 emails to do his campaign. So if you guys could sign up for the campaign, I'm gonna leave a link to it in a minute. So I'm gonna leave a link to it, and if I can find it, trying to find it. Okay, he's up to 217, so he needs about 83 more. Okay, trying to. Okay. Okay, found it. And Chris is trying to get to, he needs 83 more. So I'm going to leave a link to his Indiegogo. I left it in the chat. So if you guys could help him out by dropping your email into the Indiegogo, that could help him when he launches the Indiegogo for the Indiegogo for the Omega Black, which is some awesome black manga. I have a copy of the earlier edition. I have two copies. I have the first and second issue, but Chris is getting ready to do a far superior edition, which is going to be fuller and more in depth, and the art on it is amazing. I mean, I've seen some of the art, and you are going to be in for a treat. So definitely want to help him out with that. And again, that's all part of a Black agenda, is helping out and supporting other Black-owned businesses and helping other brothers go out here and be able to go out here and build. So when you have a Black agenda, you can start saying, okay, we have a series of goals we need to participate in. And one of those goals we have to participate in is group economics. And group economics is where we're all working together towards helping other Black businesses, like Chris's business and his Fools Entertainment Publishing, or my SJS Direct Imprint. And when each business is helping each other and people are helping other Black businesses in the community, that keeps Black dollars in the community, and that allows us to go out here and hire other Black people to work for us. So Black agenda also ties into economics, because it allows, again, it allows us to have that blueprint for our community. And part of that blueprint is working towards keeping Black dollars in the hands of other Black men and women. So when you have an agenda, you have, again, that series of goals that you measure it by. You have that series of standards that you measure things by. And those series of goals and those series of standards, what that does is it allows you to be able to say, okay, we've got these goals we're working towards. We've got these business goals we're working towards. And this allows us to go out here and be able to hire Black employees. It allows us to be able to make sure that Black people are paid a wage. We are allowed to have good working conditions for Black people. And we have something that, again, allows us to maintain a standard for our quality of life and the quality of our community. Luciano asks, why do so many pro-Blacks focus on money? Well, some pro-Blacks are hustlers and they just want to get some money for their projects. But the whole thing is that things like infrastructure and community projects are primarily done through a group effort, through Black businesses and Black and politicians. And your pro-Blacks, some of them, they just want to be able to make they want to go out here and make the fast dollar, and they want to make the dollars for whatever projects they're doing, but they're not really thinking about enriching other Black people or looking to keep other Black people employed. So they're focused on making sure they're getting money for themselves. But if you're focused on Black agenda, you're focused on goals where everybody gets money. And when everybody is getting money, then you have a stronger community overall, because that's what agendas are all about, is saying, okay, this is what we want, this is what we're working towards, and that's how you see those measures. And again, a measure is something our Black community has not had from the civil rights movement to the Jim Crow era. And again, that's why we have a complete mess of our community. We have this mess because we have no measurement to measure anything by. And our leaders just sit there and they say, oh, I'm a leader. But again, a leader has no problem going out here and saying, okay, I'm going out here, and if I'm going to motivate people and inspire people to work towards goals, I have no problem having those lines that say, this is what we're working towards, this is where we are, and this is what we need to do. Because when you have real leadership, you have a group. What's going on, Max Panther? Glad to see you here. You have something to say, okay, this is what we're supposed to work towards. this is where we are right now, and this is where we're going. For example, right now that I've got the books published for the 2020 catalog, I can start working towards goals like getting sales for these books, like trying to get 10 sales for each a month, which is something I'm trying to work towards. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but I'm still pushing towards that. And I'm pushing towards getting other books in the SJS Direct catalog, pushed towards the goal of getting sales and having numbers that are tangible, that I can measure things by. And that's, again, something that you need. And that's why I call for the leaderless system, because thank you, Far Side of the Fan. I work hard to get these books out here and get them to top quality. I mean, I really have been pushing the last couple of years to raising the bar as related to standards. So that's why when I look at the Black community and the protests for George Floyd, that's why I can say we really need agenda, because agenda keeps everybody, again, on that same page, so everybody knows what they're working towards. And we're not getting that because today's so-called Black leadership, they want to be able to just get everybody back to business as usual. And they want to get people back to being business as usual because they believe if they get back to business as usual, these racists can go back to their smooth world and they can go back to getting the crumbs from the table that enrich them but keep the Black community poor. So that's another thing that your so-called Black leadership does, is all they want to do is get their crumbs. They want to get their white woman. They want to get their red car, their Mercedes, and their house. And they figure once they've got theirs, F you. But that's not what we need anymore. When I look at Black people, we're tired of these I've got mine, F you types of the baby boom generation, who once they get their house and their car and their white woman or their white man, they just abandon the Black community and leave it for these rich people to go out here and exploit from these non-Black communities, like these Arabs who run the grocery stores in our community, and Hispanics who run the groceries in our community, and these Koreans who go out here and get hair weaves and control our hair. We used to have $1 billion business. I mean, Black people controlled $1 billion business, but we sold it all the way to Koreans because we believed that the Koreans knew better than us, but we had that. And but Trex Manifest asked a question, do I believe Marcus Garvey had the best solutions for Blacks? I believe he had some good solutions for Black people. I will say that his platform of Black First was a good platform, but his Back to Africa, that was where he got a little rickety. But his agenda was on point, as in us focusing on putting ourselves first. And that's very paramount, and that's something we need to do, is we have to stop letting other people come into our platforms and coming into our spaces and tell us what we need. No, we tell them what we want, and we tell them what we're looking for. That's what we're supposed to do, is when you have an agenda, you are saying, this is what I want, this is what I'm working towards, and I'm making efforts to work towards measuring towards those goals. So this is something the Black people, we really aren't doing a good enough job on, but we need to go out here and focus on it. Because I look at Marcus Garvey and he had the right thing. Same thing with Booker T. Washington when he talked about us working on skills. And working on skills also is something we need to work on, because a lot of us bought into the whole college thing and getting this college degree, and a lot of us wanted to get these college degrees to show out and show that we were the equal of white people. And again, it needs to stop being about white validation, because Black empowerment is not about white validation and approval. It is about Black people setting standards for ourselves and setting standards for what we consider to be a measure of accomplishment. So that's what we need to really, again, focus on, is saying, hey, we're the ones who are going to create the standards. We're the ones who are going to create the goals. And we are not measuring ourselves by your standards and your so-called goals. We are measuring ourselves by our standards and the goals we are setting for ourselves. Because if you go to the Asian community, they have their own standard for quality of life. If you go to the Hispanic community, they have their own standard for quality of life. And that is because they have agendas for what they want to do. And we need to set an agenda for ourselves. Yes, I have heard of Dr. Claude Anderson, and I have watched some of his videos, and I may start reading his books now. To the troll who wants to talk about ISIS being light-skinned, well, I hired another artist who did this cover for the Beauty Myth, so that's that. So they want to come here and troll and talk about the strawman argument of light skin and dark skin, but that's not the case. Again, when you are a Black-owned business presenting positive images of Black people, you are trying to change the message and change the narrative. It's not about the skin tone, it is about the content. And the content, again, is about my Black agenda, which is about changing the image of Black people. Because when you go out here and you don't have an agenda and a set of goals you want to accomplish, guess what you do? You wind up going out here buying into stereotypes. You go out here and buying into false narratives. And that's why publishers like myself and guys like Chris Brown are very important in changing the perception of Black in Black people's minds, because that's what I'm trying to do with much of my work. Is I'm focused on trying to change our perception of self and also change the perceptions of others all across the globe. So that's the mission that I have as related to my work. And when I look at, we just keep focusing on leadership and looking for a leader. I'm not looking for a leader. I'm looking for an agenda, because once you have an agenda, then qualified people can then be put into positions, and actions can be delegated to the most talented and most skilled. And when you have a so-called Black leader, he's not there because he meets our standard. He's there because he meets white supremacy standard. And because he's meeting white supremacy standard, that's why they have appointed him. And that's the reason why they have allowed him to come up. Because if a person like a Malcolm X were to come up, they wouldn't want that person to come up, because that person can't be a parrot. That person can't be a mouthpiece. That person cannot be a parrot who just says whatever his slave master wants. He can't be a puppet. And this is Trex, I don't believe writing leftist policies will be effective, because we need to have our standards. What did Yukasama put there? You can leave that up there. You didn't have to delete that. But the whole thing is, yeah, you don't time out Yukasama. He's cool. He's cool. Yukasama 2001 is cool. Don't time him out. He's cool. But you have to have your own. But the whole thing is, when you have your own agenda, you have your own standards. And the whole thing is, we can't write anybody's policies. We have to create our own. And when you create your own, then you have your measures to measure things by. And measuring it by your standard is the most important thing. So, because it's not about right or left, it is about what we establish. Because people on the left aren't interested in us. People on the right aren't interested in us. We have to be interested in ourselves. We have to value ourselves, and we have to establish what we value for ourselves. So it's very much about what we want as Black people, and it's not about what others want to say. Their policies should not even be a consideration. Their policies should not be a priority. And their policies are not going to be effective for Black empowerment, Black growth, or Black economic empowerment. Because when you have somebody else writing the rules for you. You're going on their terms, but you want to go on your terms. So that's why, again, an agenda is important, because an agenda is something you dictate on your terms, and an agenda is something you dictate and establish for yourself. Just give me a second here. Okay. But when you have an agenda, you have, again, your own set of standards, your own set of goals, and again, that measurement bar that you're going to make for yourself. So that's another thing that's important for Black people, is understanding we have to make our own measurement and stop listening to speeches, because we got speeches from Donald Trump talking about make America great again. We got speeches from Barack Obama talking about hope and change. But speeches, while they make you feel good, they're not the same as agenda. Agenda is something that is hard and fixed. Agenda gives you, again, that roadmap that you have to follow. Agenda gives you focus. Agenda gives you a direction. Agenda gives you purpose, and an agenda is the thing that can drive and motivate people, because when you have agenda, you have something that you can go out here and say, this is what I need to do, this is what I'm working for, and this is what I'm about. So that's why agenda is important. And agenda, again, allows you to go out here and have an impact. Because when I look at Comicsgate, and while I'm not really a big supporter of the Comicsgate this far, because a lot of people, there was like a small group that got funded and then just decided to walk away. The original leaderless goal was a good thing, because out of it, we started to see these comic companies understanding that there was no one individual they could buy off or one individual they could compromise, because when you have individuals can be picked off. But when you have agenda, you have a group. You cannot just come in and buy out, or in some cases neutralize. When you have an agenda, you have a movement of people, and a movement of people is something that you just can't beat, because if one goes down, you have two or three more, and each person can come in and fill in those positions of those other people. That's why Black agenda needs to be the priority, because when you have an agenda, you then have the infrastructure to start working towards tangibles. That's why I can agree with Professor Black Truth when he says no Black agenda, no Black vote, because with the Black agenda, you start getting the tangibles. And when you start to see large groups of Black people working towards tangibles, that's going to scare them more than what we're seeing as related to these protests. Because when you see an agenda, you see the wall getting cut off of white supremacy and them not being able to get access to Black resources or access to Black communities and be able to live off 97% of the Black dollar, in addition to other people out here, and they're getting rich at your expense. Because Comicsgate, that was one of the best things, was you had different individuals out here, and they were all working towards the same goal, and that was a good strategy. But eventually, it got undermined because of the divisions on the inside. But But the whole thing is that it was a good idea. It was the best concept of, again, a leaderless agenda. A leaderless agenda, when it's really rock solid, it can really have an impact, because, again, you have others coming in, and that's one of the things that's allowing people to keep pushing back on the comic book industry, is that there's no one person, you have a group, and that's really pushed a lot for a lot of books like the New Warriors that they tried to come out with. I hear that book might possibly be canceled because of the pushback, and that's all because they are focused on agenda, which is getting these SJWs out of the comic book industry and getting back to focusing on creating quality comics, because they are focusing on getting these far leftists out of the industry by starving them, one, by not buying their comics, and then two, making other alternative products that allow customers to have a choice. And we, in the Black community, we have to follow the exact same type of approach, because when we follow the exact same type of approach, what happens is once we've set our goals, we then, the whole thing is we're focused on what we're trying to do, and people can't undermine you because you're focusing on getting this done, getting that done. And if this guy is gone, somebody else comes in and starts working, and then you are also producing alternatives like what I'm doing again with the SJS Direct imprint. People complain that there are no positive Black fiction books, but I'm out here producing positive Black fiction books. And even though you had the troll in here talking about light skin, dark skin, straw man argument, where are you getting this type of content from your mainstream publishers? Tell me how many mainstream publishers are out here producing this kind of work that I'm producing, or the work that Chris is producing. And that's one of the things that they can't answer, because we're the ones out here producing the alternatives. And that's the thing. That's the other aspect of it, is you are offering people something tangible so that they don't have to go out here and deal with these white supremacists and these racists who want to give you the same abuse and want to give you the same garbage over and over again and tell you to accept substandard. Instead of you accepting substandard, you start demanding that your standard is what's the thing. So this is what you're looking for as related to standards. And again, you're measuring yourself by your own standard and not the standards of these white racists, white nationalists, and these other people who want to tell you that you need to buy their products in order to be accepted. Instead of you looking for the acceptance of others, like the Black people of the past, the baby boomer generation, you are looking for your own acceptance of your own people, and you're looking to meet the standards you guys establish for yourself as a people. So that's the other thing about agenda is, again, you're not looking for that acceptance and approval, and you're not measuring yourself by that acceptance and approval, because in the past we had Black people who would say, oh, you're a Black writer, and because you have all these white people reading your stuff, that means you're good. But no, you're saying that no, my standard for good is something completely different, and what I say is good is completely different than what somebody else is going to tell me is good. I'm going by what I'm saying the standard for good is, and my standard for good and my standard for value is based on again, our criteria we establish as part of the agenda. And again, that's all part of having agenda, is you're not going out here and saying, oh, I need to make this as the product for what is a good Black product. I need to make it where it meets these check marks and these check boxes. It's like, no, we're not meeting your check boxes. We're meeting our check boxes, and our check boxes are completely different than anything you have to say about us. So that's also part of agenda. And LMK Cherokee, I would love to get into the reading order for the ISIS series, but this is the 3rd book, and this is the 18th book, and this is the 4th book of the John Haynes series. But I may do another video or a live stream where I go into the order of the SJS Direct universe books, because I know that there are quite a few of them. But I'll do that in another live stream or another video. So the ISIS series starts with Amari's Revenge, and John Haynes starts with The Temptation of John Haynes. I'm going to leave a link to both of those. But the most recent John Haynes book is John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose. The most recent ISIS book is ISIS, The Main Event. But if you want to start, you can start with I'm getting ready to redo the Temptation of John Hayes' covers, so that's something that's coming. But the Temptation of John Hayes starts everything. So that's the book that starts everything, and but I wrote this similar to the way the Marvel Universe is written, and every book is an entry point. You can start with any book that you want, and I've had people start with any book that they want. So that's one of the things I did. I structured it that way. So I structured it so anybody could read whatever they like, and that's a major part of the SJS Direct Universe, is that you don't need to pick. You don't need to just start from the beginning. You can start anywhere you want, and in the back of every book, I show you the whole thing in the back matter. You can find out all the books and where to start. So that's all, part of the catalog, and so that's all part of it. So, but the whole thing is, from my years of experience working on the SJS Direct imprint, I understand the importance of agenda. I understand the importance of having that that blueprint and having that plan, because that plan is going to keep you on point. That plan is going to keep you focused. And also, I understand the importance of being on code, from growing up learning about the unwritten social rules as related to having social interaction. That's another part of it, is having people on code and teaching the code, because when you have people on code, then you have that code that allows you to know how to carry and conduct yourself. Thank you, Dark Gable. You have a conversation with death. I'm glad you love it. Did you get the man with nothing to lose? That one, everybody loves that one. You definitely have to get that one. But yeah, that one is awesome. I mean, this one, people love the man with nothing to lose. But the whole thing is the whole thing is that when you have that, it keeps you on point. And again, code also keeps you on point, because when you have the code, you have the rules that you have to follow, and you know how to carry and conduct yourself in social situations. So we need both of those things in the Black community. We need our agenda, we need our code, because marching and protesting alone is not going to be enough. Yes, that allows you to ratchet up the pressure, but as you're ratcheting up the pressure, when these people start getting anxious, you need to come to them with an agenda and a blueprint to let them know what you want, so you can get what you want. Because to just say, I want justice, is not enough. In order to get to the justice, you need a blueprint to get to the justice. Thank you, Dark Gable. I always make an effort to support other artists. That's one of the things I try to do with the Patreon money that I get and the Cash App money, is I try to share it with other Black artists and help them achieve their goals. And that's one of the reasons why I go out here and donate to other Kickstarters. That's also part of group economics, is keeping that money in the Black community, keeping those Black dollars flowing from one Black hand to the other. And that's also something I do, because I understand what agenda is all about. And again, that's all part of why I do that with the Patreon monies that I get, is I try to keep that money in the hands of other Black artists, other Black writers, and allow them to go out here. So every donation you guys do to the Patreon, I'm leaving a link to that. It allows me to, again, pay for the internet, and also allows me to go out here and share others. So yeah, we do need the blueprint because the blueprint allows you to work smarter, Dark Gable. It allows us to, again, be able to go out here, and each guy, because he's doing his tasks, he's working smarter. He's not having to work as hard because he's working on his part. Another guy is working on his part, and each person is working towards the ultimate goal of Black empowerment. So Black empowerment is not something that one person can do. And that's another notion we need to get out of, because when you have these people with the Black leadership mentality, they're still buying into the whole concept of this Messiah coming along and saving the Black community. That's what they thought Martin Luther King was going to be. That's what they thought Barack Obama was going to be. But that's not how you empower a community. And community is empowered by all of the people working together, and all of the people, again, knowing the blueprint, and all of the people being on code. That's how you empower a people. And again, this is the problem we have, is we want this guy who comes out of nowhere, this Messiah, who's going to come in and be the great savior. But there is no great savior for Black people. That's the notion we need to get out of in the 21st century, is this notion of, oh, there's going to be the great Black savior who's going to come in, and you're like a Martin Luther King, or a guy who's just going to come in and save the Black community. I'm like, no, sorry, there's not going to be a savior. It's going to take all of us coming in, and it's going to take all of us working towards that agenda to get us to go somewhere, because we can't expect other people to come in and do our work for us. And that's, and again, another notion that the baby boomers and the civil rights generation had was, oh, somebody's going to come in and do your work for you. No, we got to go out here and roll up our sleeves and get out here and do our own work ourselves. So that's also something that people who are agenda driven are focused on. They understand that they have to do their part, and they have to go out here and put that work in, because the only person who's going to appreciate the work that you do is you. You can't expect other people to do your work for you. You're going to have to put that work in too. So that's another thing, Black men and women have to focus on, is saying, look, if we want this agenda, we've got to work towards this agenda, and we have to go out here and get it done. We're not looking for somebody else to. No, it doesn't mean stepping away from God. Not at all, Maurice. It doesn't mean stepping away from God, because God wants us to work. I mean, he said faith without works is dead. So we have to still go out here and work. I mean, in order for God to facilitate, we have to put work in. And usually, from my own personal experience, when I put work in, God then either leads me to somebody, or somebody is led to me to help me out. And again, it's about the effort you put in. And the big problem with a lot of Black folks is we've been taught, oh, we need to wait for the great savior. We need to wait for some politician. We need to wait for some Black leader to come along. And I'm sorry, as I see it, we have to understand our roles as men and women, as stewards and heads of households as Black men, and helpmeets and supports as Black women. Because if you understand God's order, you understand, and you understand the word of God, you understand you're supposed to go to work. You're supposed to do work. And your work is out here, again, working towards that agenda. And when you're working towards the agenda, God facilitate, and it's within God's will, you will run into people who will want to help you out. So what will happen is God will facilitate by, oh, you'll run into this guy who will send you an email, like I've run into, or people will send me a donation, and that'll help move me a little bit more forward towards the goals that I'm looking to do. For example, for some of my books, I would get donations, and I would be wondering, how am I going to get this book published? How am I going to get this book cover? And God would send somebody to donate the money for the cover, and I would get it done. Like, for example, with the Samurai Goddess book, that's how God worked. I mean, I was like thinking I was going to have to throw a generic cover on it, and then God one day sent a young lady to donate to my PayPal, and all of a sudden I had a good chunk of the money to pay for the book, and then I took some stuff off eBay and sold it there, and I got the rest of it. So you have to put some work in, and God will put some work in. So that's how I got the cover for it. The cover for Isa Samurai Goddess was God putting people in my way. And, that's how things work. I mean, you cannot expect to just get things done without God. And again, you have to put work in along with it. You just can't sit there and just wait for something to magically come out of the sky. And that's the whole notion that Black people have about trying to move forward, is they're still waiting for somebody else to come in and do for them to get their tangibles. But you're going to have to go out here and work for those tangibles and work towards getting those tangibles, because no one's going to give them. You're going to have to go out here and work for them. And in some cases, you may even have to start working towards taking what you need, because in order to get power, you cannot sit there and be passive. You have to sit there and you have to go out here and be active, because we've had the passive approach of the sit here and do nothing pushed to us by these pimp pastors and these so-called Black leaders for over 50 years. And we have not progressed a single step. So that's why I believe, again, agenda is more important than leadership, because agenda means we can have, again, that measure for goals, we have that measure for standards, and we have that measure, most importantly, of accountability. Because when you have that measure of accountability, guess what? You are going to be held to that standard of accountability. And that's something we don't have right now, because today's Black leaders, all they want to do is give each other passes and get passes from their white slave masters. And once they get a pass for their failure, they're allowed to continue to operate in the Black community. So that's the big problem we have, is they are allowed to continue to operate when these people should have been terminated years ago. Because if they were working at a business, they would have been fired years ago for not meeting the standards for work or accomplishing any work out here. So that's what we would have done had we had a set agenda, had we set a code. And it's still not too late for us to get an agenda. Now, some people will ask, well, again, what do you need to have an agenda? And again, the terms, again, are very, as I see it, they're right in front of us. And an agenda is, again, the things you want clearly stated to everyone. And they are the things that you insist that you're going to get. So these are things that you need to focus on it as related to agenda, is like things like, if you say you want to stop police brutality, you're saying, okay, we want to stop this police brutality by saying we're going to have a standard and a code of conduct for these police officers. And in addition to having that standard, we're going to work towards ensuring that our people are patrolling our communities. So we're not going to have outsiders coming in to our communities policing our people. No, we are going to have our people getting those jobs. Same thing with the teaching. We're going to make sure that Black teachers are in our schools so that our children are taught by people that look like us. So we're going to have our people doing the work in our community, and we're going to ensure that our people are getting these jobs. Again, ensuring that tangible resources not only stay in our community, but we also have tangible culture being taught in our community. Because when you see people that look like you in these jobs of police officers, firemen, and teachers, guess what? Your kids get a sense of pride. Your kids have something to aspire to, and your kids have somebody that they see in the community who is helping to work towards maintaining and preserving your community. So that is also another part of tangibles, is ensuring that your people are the ones working in your community, your people are the ones with the businesses in your community, and that your people are ensuring that the resources are there. But again, that's all about agenda. And when you have a Black agenda goes out here and stops Black unemployment. A Black agenda stops Black crime. A Black agenda stops things like police brutality. And a Black agenda stops things because people are measured by that Black agenda, and they are held accountable by that Black agenda. So I'm going to wrap up tonight's stream. I want to thank everybody for coming to tonight's stream. And I really want to get 10 sales on ISIS, the main event, and John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose. So I really would appreciate if you head over to Amazon and pick these two books up in paperback and Kindle format. And if you want to pick up ISIS, the Beauty Myth, you can pick up ISIS, the Beauty Myth. So we don't need to define black, because black is more to it than that. House of Wolves. So we need to. I will leave a link to buy. You know. All right, 1 minute, Luciano. You can get ISIS, the main event, on Amazon, and you can also get and I'm going to leave a link to the Cash App for Luciano, and anybody else who wants to donate, you can donate to the Cash App there, and also going to leave a link to the Patreon, because that helps out a lot. And again, I have a whole host of positive black fiction over on Amazon, and all of these books are like ISIS, Imitation of Life, are meant to give you a positive picture of the black people and the black experience. So I have lots and lots of positive black fiction. I've written over 70 books and made an effort to really, go out here and give people positive black images and positive stories featuring black characters. So it's been a lot of work, and again, I understand what needs to be done and what needs to be accomplished, and it's a long road, but we can get there. I know we can get there, but we just have to keep pushing and keep persevering. So I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream, and I will be hoping you will be here for next week's stream.